She never imagined that the man who once shattered her dreams would one day stand before her, trembling, begging for mercy. But life has its own way of writing justice. Some relationships aren't built on blood. They're built on trust and respect. And when that thread breaks, all that's left behind are shards of memory, some piercing, some tangled in unanswered questions. Life moves forward, but certain shadows of the past never stop following us. There was a time when a police officer called off his wedding just hours before the ceremony. Why? Because the bride's father couldn't afford to give him a car and a heavy dowry. The groom's family turned the wedding procession around, crushing the dignity of the bride's family in front of everyone. But this story didn't end there. The girl who was rejected for not bringing enough money became a deputy superintendent of police on her own merit. And then fate played its hand. That same officer who once walked away from her now stood in front of her desk, holding a file, saluting with his head bowed, saying, "Ma'am, please sign this." This isn't just a story of a woman's success. It's the story of a slap delivered to greed and arrogance. It's the story of justice that time itself brought forward. It was late evening at the University of Lucknow. Students were buried in books at the library, while others chatted over tea at the campus cafe. Among them was Sara Mitchell, serious, independent, and fiercely determined to achieve her dreams. She had just completed her undergraduate degree and was now preparing for the state civil services exam. Her father, Frank Mitchell, was a simple farmer who ran a small general store in their rural town in upstate New York. They had a little farmland too, but it barely brought in enough to cover the family's needs. Sarah had two younger sisters, Emma and Claire, both in college, and a younger brother, Daniel, still in high school. Frank constantly worried about getting his eldest daughter settled so he could focus on the others. One day, word spread in town about a young man named Hunter Caldwell from a neighboring county. He was preparing for the same civil service exams. He was educated, hardworking, and had already taken the exam a few times. When Frank heard about him, he thought, he's educated, driven, and if he gets into government service, my daughter's future will be secure. People in town often said, "A match like this doesn't come easy for a girl." Frank and some relatives met Hunter's family. They learned that Hunter was staying in Albany, studying hard. He looked decent, was smart, and seemed ambitious. When Hunter first saw Sarah, he liked her. But Sarah didn't immediately agree to the match. She had big dreams. She wanted to become an officer herself. She wanted to stand on her own feet first, then think about marriage. But seeing her father's worry and the weight of family responsibilities, she stayed silent. When her family explained that Hunter was educated and that she could continue her studies even after marriage, Sarah reluctantly agreed. Within days, the engagement was set. A wedding date was chosen. Relatives and townsfolk congratulated Frank. "Congratulations, Frank. Your daughter's going to live like a queen. She's marrying into an officer's family." Sarah, too, slowly began to accept the relationship. She thought Hunter was a good man and hardworking. She imagined that after marriage, they could study together and support each other's goals. But fate had written something else entirely. Wedding preparations began. The family started shopping for clothes, jewelry, and other essentials. Sarah continued her studies. Then came big news. Hunter had been selected as a police officer. The moment his family heard, celebrations erupted. His mother, Ruth Caldwell, couldn't contain her joy. The news spread through town like wildfire. "Sarah's really going to have it made now. She's marrying a cop." Sarah's family was overjoyed too. Frank breathed a sigh of relief. He felt his daughter's future was now secure. A government job meant stability and respect. At first, everything seemed fine. But slowly, Hunter and his family's attitude began to shift. They started seeing themselves as superior. "Our son is a government officer now. He could marry into a much wealthier family." This shift in mindset bred greed. What was once a simple, respectful arrangement now became a transaction in their eyes. They forgot that Sarah was also working day and night to become an officer. They didn't realize that the girl they were about to reject could one day shake their entire world. But the real test of this relationship was yet to come. Time passed. Wedding preparations were in full swing. Frank was thrilled about his daughter's marriage. He distributed sweets around town, invited relatives, and ordered wedding invitations. Hunter's family was equally celebratory, proudly telling everyone, "Our son is a police officer now." Neighbors came by with congratulations. But beneath this joy, a strange tension was brewing. Ever since Hunter's selection, his family's mindset had changed. What was once seen as a normal wedding now looked like an opportunity for profit. Gossip started swirling in town. Hunter's a government officer now. He should be getting serious money and a car. Relatives and acquaintances began pushing his family. You've got options now. The boy's an officer. Any wealthy family would take him in a heartbeat. Why settle for this match? Slowly, these words seeped into the minds of Hunter's father, Roger Caldwell, and his older brother, Travis. They began to think, if others are offering so much, why shouldn't we ask the same from our bride's family? One evening, while Frank was at his store, Roger and Travis showed up. Their faces didn't carry the warmth they once did. Roger started cautiously. Look, Frank, everything's going well on our end. The wedding date's set, but now that our boy's become a police officer, you know how much respect that commands? Frank smiled. Yes, that's wonderful news for all of us. But Roger's next words knocked the ground out from under him. We're not greedy people, but when we're getting such good offers, we have to think. We've been offered $50,000 and a brand new car worth $30,000. But we don't want anything from anyone else. If you could just gift our son-in-law a car, that would be perfect. Frank was stunned. His eyes showed a mix of fear and anger. He spoke softly. What are you saying? When we agreed to this match, your son had nothing. My daughter had nothing. But both were working hard. If tomorrow my daughter becomes an officer, should I start making demands too? But Hunter's family wasn't willing to listen. They were only thinking about their gain. They also knew that Frank owned land along the highway and was expecting government compensation, nearly $200,000. Roger said, We're not forcing you, but you have to understand. The boy's a police officer now. Certain things are expected. You're getting that compensation. Just share some of it with us. Frank's face hardened. He took a deep breath. If you can't change your mindset, fine. But I can't send my daughter into a greedy household. If you're bargaining before the wedding, what will you do after? But Roger and Travis didn't budge. They said, if you can't give the car, we'll have to reconsider this relationship. When Sara heard this, her blood boiled. She immediately called Hunter. Do you think the same way your father and brother do? Hunter replied coldly. Look, Sara, what can I say? I'll do what my father and brother say. We're still getting married, but if you just agree to the car and money, there won't be any problem. Sara's eyes filled with angry tears. She said firmly, if you're trying to save this relationship over money and a car, your mindset is pathetic. I won't marry into a family where greed has already poisoned everything. Hunter laughed. Do what you want, but your father's ready to borrow money to meet our demands. If you agree to, it'll be easier. Sara's face turned red with rage. She said in a cold voice, I'd rather become an officer through my own hard work than marry a greedy man like you, and I'll show you your place myself. That day, Sara made a decision. She would focus only on her own new Lee. She couldn't bear to see her father's bowed head and his tears. The wedding day was approaching, but the relationship was on the verge of collapse. Frank was torn. Should he give in to their greed for his daughter's happiness or stand firm? In the end, the helpless father agreed to try to meet their demands. 4 days before the wedding, Frank was consumed with worry. He tried everything to arrange for a car so the wedding could go smoothly. He had tried to reason with Roger and Travis, but nothing worked. Roger made it clear, no car, no wedding. Frank finally decided to borrow money and buy a modest car to appease them, but fate turned against him. The person he hoped to borrow from had a son who got into an accident. That man was now in crisis himself and couldn't help. The government compensation hadn't arrived either. Frank made multiple trips to government offices, only to hear, the file's being processed. The money will come soon. Now, only 3 days remained. Frank's anxiety peaked. He tossed and turned all night, thinking, what if the money doesn't come? Will they turn the wedding procession away? Finally, the wedding day arrived. The haldi and mehendi ceremonies had been completed. Relatives were busy with preparations. Sara, who had been silent, could feel her father's distress. As evening fell, the wedding procession arrived with drums and music. The groom rode a decorated horse. Lights sparkled everywhere, and people's faces glowed with excitement. But behind this joy, Frank's heart was filled with dread. After the welcoming ceremony, everything changed. As soon as the procession reached the gate, Hunter got off the horse and went straight to his father. Roger called Frank over and said sternly, "Where's the car? Fulfill your promise first, then we'll do the wedding." The whole atmosphere went silent. The relatives who had been dancing froze. Frank's face went pale. His eyes showed helplessness. With trembling hands, he pleaded, "Son, my compensation money hasn't come yet. The person I tried to borrow from had his son in an accident. I promise, as soon as the money comes, I'll get you the car." But Roger and Travis refused to listen. "If you didn't have the money, why did you make the promise? If you couldn't afford it, why agree to the match?" Hearing this, Frank's eyes welled up. He was in deep pain. But greater than that pain was the stain on his honor. He stood silently for a moment. Then slowly, he removed his turban and placed it at Hunter's feet. "Son, my daughter's honor is at stake. Please go through with the wedding. I'll pay everything back slowly." Watching this, Sara's blood boiled. She had never imagined her father, who had protected his dignity his whole life, would place his turban at someone's feet. The noise of the procession had quieted. The music faded into some forgotten corner. When Hunter and Roger realized the car wasn't arranged, their faces twisted with anger. Hunter, who had just become a police officer, stood arrogantly beside his father and shouted, "My son is a cop, and you had the nerve to try to marry him without dowry? If you couldn't afford it, why make the promise?" Frank's eyes brimmed with pain. He said shakily, "What are you saying? When this match was made, your son was nothing, not a security guard, not even a clerk. So why this arrogance now?" But Roger and his son had crossed into rudeness. They were taunting him loudly, humiliating Frank in front of everyone. Sara, who had been inside listening to everything, couldn't take it anymore. Her steps moved quickly outside. Her eyes burned with rage. She walked through the crowd and stood directly in front of Hunter, looking him straight in the eye. "You wanted dowry, didn't you? You wanted a car, didn't you? Here's your answer." And a hard slap landed on Hunter's face. The entire crowd gasped. The drumbeat stopped. A stunned silence fell over the wedding party. Hunter staggered back, shocked. He never imagined the girl he was humiliating would slap him in front of everyone. Sara said in a sharp voice, "Keep your pride about being a cop at home. When the protector of the law becomes its violator, he deserves a slap from the law itself." Then, without hesitation, she pulled out her phone and started dialing. "If you stay here one more minute, I'm calling the police. Your job just started, and it'll be over before it begins." Hearing this, Hunter and his family were stunned. Their faces showed a mix of shame and fear. People around began whispering, "The girl did the right thing. This guy turned out to be a dowry hound. Good thing she broke it off." Roger, who moments ago thought his honor was untouchable, now hung his head in shame. The wedding procession that had arrived with such pride was now forced to leave in disgrace. Hunter's relatives and guests slowly began removing their festive turbans. Hands that had held drums now quietly moved toward their cars and carts. Frank was still broken inside. Tears filled his eyes. He said to his daughter, "Why did you have to do all this? Now the relationship is ruined. What will people say?" But Sara had grown even stronger. She wiped her father's tears and said calmly, "Dad, don't worry. Marriage isn't a business deal to be settled with money. Even if you had given them everything, their greed wouldn't have ended." Frank fell silent. For the first time, he realized his daughter wasn't weak. She was the strongest of them all. Sara had made a decision. No marriage built on dowry. Her only destination now was her own hard work. After the slap and the procession's departure, Sara made a vow. Her life would now be dedicated only to self-respect and her goals. She became friends with her books. She worked day and night, transforming herself into a strong, determined woman. Frank, who once worried endlessly about her marriage, was now reassured watching her dedication. He no longer bent to dowry demands. Instead, he made his daughter's dreams his own mission. Years passed. The first year was spent in preparation. The second year was even harder. But in the third year, Sara's hard work paid off. When the civil services results were announced, one name echoed through the entire town. Sara Mitchell had become a Deputy Superintendent of Police. When Frank heard the news, Tears of pride filled his eyes. The daughter who had been rejected by greedy people was now an officer. Every corner of town buzzed with talk. If a girl is strong, she should be like Sara. She slapped the greedy and wrote her own destiny. After completing her training, Sara's first posting was in Riverdale County, upstate New York. She had become a strict and honest officer. Every week, she held special hearings for women's issues. One day, during a hearing, some women came in crying. They explained that some local thugs had assaulted them, and the police station refused to file their reports. Sara asked seriously, "Which officer at the station refused to file the complaint?" The women answered, "Ma'am, the station in charge is Officer Hunter Caldwell. He's the one not listening." Sara's expression changed. The same Hunter who had broken off the engagement out of greed was now misusing his uniform. Sara immediately ordered her car and headed for an on-the-spot inspection of the station. The door was knocked loudly. When Hunter, sitting inside, heard that the DSP herself had arrived, he panicked. He jumped up from his chair, the door opened, and there stood DSP Sara Mitchell in full uniform. Hunter's mind flashed back to that old scene. The same girl who had turned his wedding procession away now stood before him as his superior. He immediately saluted, but sweat dripped from his forehead. "Ma'am, we were investigating," Hunter tried to explain, but Sara's eyes went straight to the room inside, where criminals sat comfortably. Beer bottles were on the table. Sara said coldly, "Investigating or partying? Do you even know what duty you're performing?" Hunter's condition worsened. He stammered nervously, "No, ma'am, I was just—" Sara cut him off, picking up a file. "Complaints about you have been coming in for days. But I didn't know the Hunter here was the same one who once broke off an engagement over dowry." Hunter tried to defend himself. "Ma'am, you're misunderstanding. I just wanted to get married, but you didn't agree." Sara's eyes flashed with contempt. "Wanted to get married? Or wanted to trade for a car and dowry? I don't care if you got married or not, but now even your job might not survive." Hunter's situation turned desperate. He folded his hands. "Ma'am, I made a mistake. You know that I—" Sara said sharply, "Even if you begged me to marry you for free, I wouldn't even look at you." She immediately ordered departmental action and instructed that a report be filed. Now Hunter realized that the girl he had rejected was the one writing his fate. On Sara's orders, a detailed report was prepared and sent to police headquarters. The report clearly stated that station in charge Hunter Caldwell was involved in corruption, aiding criminals, and denying justice to victims. It also noted that he deliberately failed to register complaints to protect the accused. Such an officer has no right to remain on duty. As soon as the report reached headquarters, the police department was in turmoil. The process to suspend Hunter began immediately. The news spread like wildfire. Hunter finally dropped his arrogance and rushed to Frank Mitchell's house. Frank, who once felt pride about this relationship, now saw that same man standing helplessly at his door. Hunter folded his hands and nearly begged, "Mr. Mitchell, I made a mistake. Please help me. I'm going to lose my job. If you convince Sara, maybe she'll withdraw the report." Frank took a deep breath and said firmly, "Did you help me that day when I placed my turban at your feet and begged? When my daughter's honor was at stake, what did you do? Now your job is at stake, so you came running." Hunter lowered his head. Frank continued, "That day your father said, 'If you couldn't afford it, why agree to the match?' Now I ask you the same. If you couldn't be honest, why take a job in the police? What's happening to you isn't revenge. It's the result of your actions. The decision will be made by the police department, not my daughter. Sara only reported your wrongdoings. Now the law will decide." Hearing this, Hunter's last hope crumbled. The entire region was talking about one thing. If you want to be an officer, be like Sara. If you're an officer, don't compromise with the law. The girl who was once about to become a victim of dowry greed had now taught those greedy people a lesson. Hunter made one last attempt to meet Sara. He went to her office and said softly, "Sara, I never got married. If you say so, I'm ready to marry you now." Sara laughed sharply. "Hunter, even if you offered to marry me for free, I wouldn't even turn to look at you." Without a moment's delay, she picked up the file and signed it. Now the police department would decide Hunter Caldwell's fate. In the end, Sara said to her father, "Dad, the day you decided to stop my wedding was the best decision. Otherwise, today I would have been some greedy man's wife, my life ruined. Frank's eyes filled with tears of pride and relief. He hugged his daughter and said, "You've set an example not just for yourself, but for every girl in society." Moral of the story: a relationship bought with money isn't a relationship, it's a transaction, and transactions are never permanent. Real respect isn't bought with wealth, it's earned through character. When arrogance takes over, a person forgets their roots. And a tree that forgets its roots doesn't take long to fall. The intoxication of power and position makes people forget their worth, but time's slap brings them back to reality. Honesty is greater than any position, and character is greater than any wealth. If this story touched your heart, subscribe for more inspiring stories like this. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Let's stand together against greed and for dignity.